desire that is backed by ability and the willingness to pay. This is how you could write demand in simple layman language without requiring to remember the quoted definition. Alright. Now when we talk about the quoted definition, it will definitely give you some brownie points in your exams, because it makes people, specifically the ones who are assessing your papers, really happy to look at it. And how you would write the definition for demand is basically what I've written on the screen already. So this the definition that you could see on the screen in the quoted segment is, it refers to the quantity of a commodity a buyer is willing and able to pay at a price during a given period of time. Now if you see, there are some pointers that I have highlighted in this definition. The reason for highlighting this is that these topics or these words are super important for you to mention in the quoted definitions, because these are somebody else's words and you cannot really twist these words, give your homeproduction.com in exams, because that doesn't work in that manner. Okay. So when you are writing a quoted definition, this is the exact same thing they would expect you to write down in your exams, and this is how it goes. So it refers to the quantity, so quantity is stressed, of a commodity a buyer is willing and able to buy, this is again stressed, hence underlined, at a price during a given period of time. So if you are talking in terms of, let us say, demand from a given individual, let us say the person bread, okay, this individual is purchasing bread. Now how much bread this individual is purchasing? 1 loaf. All right, this is the quantity of the commodity called bread, and the price could be, let us say, $1. All right, and how often is this person purchasing the bread? It could be daily, it's a daily necessity, so it could be a daily purchase that this person is making. So when we talk about demand, this is what we are referring to as effective demand or demand. Without a person actually purchasing the product, he or she would not create effective demand. So you should be able to pay for the product and you should be willing to pay for the product. So if you just stand outside the store, you do window shopping and you just say, oh wow, the thing is good, but you just don't end up into the store and purchase it, then in those cases you are not creating demand. All right. So for anything to be called as demand, you need to be able to pay and you should be willing to pay for that particular commodity. That's when you would create a demand. So this is how you would say a demand for bread as a commodity is created. All right. So this is the quantity, this is the price, and this is the frequency with regards to the time, how often the person is buying this commodity. All right. Now when we talk about demand, basically there are different types of demands, but I won't delve into those different types right now. There's a proper video available on my channel, you could watch there. I am going to talk in length or at length about individual demand and market demand. All right. So the first thing that we are going to look at are the various factors that would influence individual demand. I'm sorry. Now, when we talk about individual demand, it's the demand from one individual buyer. Okay. So when we talk about demand from one individual buyer, what are the factors that would influence this person's ability and willingness to purchase? So these are the factors that I've listed here. So the first factor here is the price of the given commodity. Now, as a buyer, our agenda, our aim is to maximize satisfaction, right? And how do we find ourselves most satisfied? When we pay less and we get more. That's when we would feel satisfied, and that's why a lot of people flock to malls whenever a discount or a sale offer or a buy one get one free offer is listed, because we pay less and you get more, and that's when you would maximize your satisfaction as a consumer, right? So when we talk in terms of price of the commodity, the common understanding here is when the commodity's price is high, this commodity impacts your ability to pay. Let me write that down. So it would impact your ability to pay, which would go down, and because of which the quantity demanded of this particular commodity would also fall. The opposite would also hold true. That means the moment price of the commodity falls, your ability to pay or afford, the purchasing power, would go up, and hence your quantity demanded, the purchase of that commodity, would simply go up. So we can clearly see that price and the demand for the commodity are moving in opposite directions, but we will get into this a little at depth in a while once I finish all the factors with regards to individual and market demand. The next factor is income. Income is what you earn after rendering your physical or mental work, right, your labor. So when we talk about income, on a general notion, when people earn more, they spend more. That means the demand for goods and services would also be high. But when we talk about income, specifically when it comes to econs, we are focusing on three different types of commodities. The first type of commodity is called as normal goods. Now these goods are those commodities which people buy more often when they are earning a high income. Why? Because high income would make them capable of affording these goods and services. So all high ticket commodities, all expensive commodities would be afforded by people or individual consumers when their incomes are high. All right. So at higher incomes, demand for normal goods would be high, and likewise when people don't, would be low when the income levels are low. So that is one type of relationship you would have to remember when we talk in terms of the income of consumers. The second type of relationship is in terms of necessities. Now necessities are those whether you are earning a high amount of income or a low income. Demand for necessities would remain the same. It would continue to exist as of commodities which are called inferior goods. Now inferior goods, as the name, you earn a good salary. Where would you prefer to eat? At a roadside joint or in a nice fine and dine kind of a setup? I think you would prefer a fine dine setup if you are earning a good salary. A roadside joint might not suit your social status, right? So at higher levels of income, people would demand fewer cheap commodities. So demand for inferior goods would be less, and all to afford normal goods or superior goods or luxurious goods. So in those cases, your demand for inferior goods is going to be high. All right. So the three types of relations that we are supposed to remember with regards to income is, with regards to normal goods, income is varying directly or it has a direct relationship. With regards to necessities, they do not depend on income. So demand for necessities, as we say, is income inelastic. Okay. And likewise, when it comes to inferior goods, the demand for inferior goods, then the relationship with income is inverse. Why inverse? Because see, these arrows, they are moving in opposite directions. So that's an inverse relationship. So relationship between income and demand for inferior goods is inverse. So whenever you are explaining income as a factor influencing demand, you are supposed to talk about all the three scenarios. Otherwise, your answer would look incomplete and you may not get the kind of marks you were expecting out of it. All right. The next category that would impact individual demand is credit facilities. Now, credit facilities basically would refer to the borrowings that people may want to. These are loans basically, or debt that you may avail from banking or financial institutions that would be required if you are buying expensive goods. Now, when we talk about expensive goods, easy access to these loans, right? Easy access means they are available, all right? Easy available. That's when spending is going to be high for those high-end goods, and the demand, the QD, would also be high. As substitutes and complements. Now, substitutes are, example is, let us say, Pepsi and Coke. Both are aerated waters. When we talk about, let us say, pen and ink, you need both together. We have tea and we have coffee. There are two commodities, all right? So, when price of tea increases, demand for tea falls, would want to buy more of coffee. So, when price of one commodity increases and that leads to an increase in the demand for another commodity, these type of goods are called substitutes. So, substitutes, how do you identify that it is a substitute commodity that we are looking at? Both the price of the commodity and demand for another commodity would move in the same direction, all right? If price of one commodity falls and that leads to a demand for other commodity to fall along with it, then they are substitutes. They have a positive cross relationship, all right? So, these kind of goods would be called as substitutes. Now, if you are a consumer and you were, let us say, visiting the mall or the shopping store to buy tea, and you suddenly found, oh, tea is becoming expensive, I can't really afford tea. What would you do? You would want to move on to coffee if there are no other brands of tea available. If there are other brands of tea available, then you would not want to buy that brand of tea and you might shift to a substitute brand. Let us say, for example, red label tea is expensive. So, you would want to shift to maybe Taj Mahal tea or maybe Tata tea or maybe society tea. There are plenty of teas available in the grocery store. So, you might want to shift to another brand. Why did you do that? Because you could easily use that other brand instead of this one, right? And because this brand became expensive, the other brand's demand automatically became higher. These kind of goods are called substitutes, all right? Complements, on the other hand, are the commodities, as I mentioned, would be that you would want to use together to satisfy one want. So, when we talk about pen and ink, let us say, so when price of pen, let me write that down over here again. So, when price of pen goes up, a logical consumer would bring down his demand for pen, right? Now, ink that goes along with the pen would serve no purpose if there is no pen. So, demand for ink would also fall. Now, these type of goods where price of one commodity and the demand for other happen to move in opposite directions, share an inverse relationship, are called complementary goods or complements. They are jointly demanded. Clear? So, this is price of other related goods. Tastes and preferences is demand. So, now when we talk about market demand, it's the demand. The moment population increases, more people would be requiring the commodities now, the goods and services. So, demand for goods and services would also go up. So, for example, if in a given region there are a lot of old people in a country, right? In a market there are a lot of old people. So, you may see demand high for those goods that would cater to these old people. For example, medical supplies, ambulance services, healthcare services, adult diapers, so on and so forth. So, these goods would be in high demand if you have a lot of aging population in a given country. So, not only the number of people, but how people are segmented would also impact the market demand. Next is seasons. So if it is let us say winters in a given region, so it is winters for everybody, and demand the goods and services that would be demanded during that time frame would see a surge in the buying activity of the consumers. So there will be high demand for goods that would be required in winters. Likewise, we have distribution of income. So when we talk about distribution of income, we are basically focusing on how many rich and how many poor into a given country or into a given market. High demand for luxuries because they can easily afford these kind of goods. But if there are a lot of poor people in a given market, then you would see a very high demand for necessities. They may not be capable of affording luxuries. They might be barely keeping their raised. Now the kind of direct taxes, let me just write that down. So direct taxes, when are raised, it would bring down the disposable income. Do we understand what are disposable income? So it's the income that is left after paying all the taxes. So disposable income would fall, and hence the demand for goods and services would also fall. You may not. So law of demand basically is how demand. We begin with a term called ceteris paribus. Now ceteris paribus is an essential condition that you need to hold while studying the law of any of the laws in the microeconomics. Alright. So ceteris paribus basically would mean all the factors that influence demand other than the price of the commodity to be constant. Alright. So all these factors that we just studied above, the factors influencing individual demand and the factors influencing market demand, all of them are supposed to remain constant. And if they are constant, then as the price of a commodity rises, its quantity demanded would fall, and vice versa. Now I have written vice versa, but in your exams you cannot write vice versa because you are supposed to write the entire law in its entirety, the whole of it. Alright, vice versa is not allowed in your exams. You would not get the desired marks for your answers. So vice versa means the opposite also holds true. So the opposite statement would be, as the price of a commodity falls, its quantity demanded rises. Alright, so instead of writing this, that's what you need to write. So that's the law of demand, and based on this statement or these segments, we have the assumptions of the law, which states that all the factors that we just studied are assumed to remain constant. So if you are writing assumptions for your exams, you cannot just write this much. You would be required to write in pointers for everything. For example, there is no change in population and segmentation. The seasons are, there is no change in the demand with regards to seasons. Distribution of income remains constant. Tax structure in the economy or in the market remains constant. Credit facilities do not change. So everything is supposed to remain the same. Those are what we call as assumptions. Alright. Then we take a look at what the demand curve would look like. Right. So this is how the demand curve would look. In this diagram, we have y-axis, which is measuring the price in terms of dollars. X-axis is measuring quantity demanded. This is the demand curve, which is labeled D. Alright. Now everything in black are initial situations, everything in another color are the new situations. So in this case, the initial situation is P and Q. P is the price and Q is the quantity at price P. That's what is being demanded in this market by this individual. Okay. Now the moment price is falling from P to P1, from Q to Q1, right? So price fell and quantity demanded is a downward sloping curve. Let me write that down. It's a downward sloping curve. And what does this downward sloping curve tell us? It tells us that price and quantity demanded are inversely related. Alright, inversely related or negatively related. Even that is absolutely fine. You could write either of the two. The demand curve, a downward sloping curve from left to right. That's how the demand curve would slope. It would slope downwards from left to right, indicating the negative, inverse or indirect relationship between price and quantity demanded. I hope you are understanding whatever has been taught until now. Now we'll take a reason as to why the demand curve is a downward sloping curve. Why is it sloping downwards? Why it doesn't go upwards? So let's take a look at the reasons. The first reason here is income effect. Now the income that we are talking about over here is real income. Okay. Now what is real income? Real income is basically the purchasing power of a consumer. Alright, purchasing power. Now, what you are earning, say $1,000 a month, okay, and you spend it on number of goods and services throughout the month. It could be, say, 100 goods and services. You are spending this $1,000 a month. You might not be able to buy all these 100 goods and services now, because if the prices of few of these 100 goods goes up, it would make you feel poorer. Okay, it will make you feel poorer. That goods, you will buy fewer goods. So what did we establish? As the price went up, the demand or the purchasing of these goods and services went down. That's what we mean by income effect. Likewise, we have substitution effect. We've already studied prices of other goods and services as a factor influencing individual demand. So substitution is happening. That commodity which is much cheaper would be bought. So again we have a inverse relationship getting established over here. Then we have marginal utility law. It's a law a lot of boards study at depth. Some boards do not study it at all, but it is still a major factor why the demand curve is a downward sloping curve. Now what does the law of diminishing marginal utility states? I won't give you the statement, just a gist of what it is. So it states the more you have a given commodity with you, the lesser you would want to buy more of it. For example, you already have, let us say, what are you buying? Let us say you are buying t-shirts. Okay, so you already have, let us say, red t-shirts in your wardrobe. So when you go up for shopping in a mall next time, you are less likely to look at red because you already have that in your wardrobe. And if you are still looking at a red, you would not want to buy it at an expensive rate. You would only prefer to buy it if it is cheaper, right? So that states that if you already have something in your possession and if you want to add something of the same category again into your possession, you would not want to spend the same amount of money that you spent earlier. That is what the diminishing marginal utility would do to you, specifically with regards to your preferences. All right, so it's a huge law in its entirety, and there's a complete series available on the law of diminishing marginal utility. So if you are interested in knowing about this, there's a playlist available rather on my channel. You could take a look at that and understand the concept there. But this again states that at higher prices, consumers would not want to buy something that they already have. They would purchase more of that commodity only if the prices are slashed or reduced. So at lower prices only will they demand more of the commodity that they feel is a reduction in the price, right? So whenever the prices are slashed, all of a sudden the number of people affording this commodity would go up, and hence the demand would also go up, and would establish a negative relationship between price and the demand for that particular commodity. How many number of uses the commodity could be put to? So for example, when we say milk, right? So milk is something that you could use for drinking, for making tea, for making yogurt, for making butter, right? The moment price of milk goes up. Now you would not want reducing the uses that you could put milk to. The quantity that you would now want to buy would also go down. That's why you would also have again a negative relationship between price and quantity purchased of that particular commodity. So at higher prices you bring down the number of uses, and at lower prices you may just put it to as many uses as you want, and you might want to buy a higher or a larger quantity of the commodity. Clear? So these are the reasons why you would see a demand curve negatively sloping or downward sloping. Alright, let's take a look at the exceptions to the law. So what are exceptions? These are the situations where the law of demand does not operate. Alright, so what does the law of demand says? Price falls, quantity demanded goes up. This is the law of demand. Or price rises, quantity falls. This also is in accordance with the law of demand. But when we talk about exceptions, exceptions would say price goes up, quantity also goes up. That's an exception. We are violating the law. Law says that price and quantity are inversely related. You see the arrows here? It's downward here and upward here. But when we talk about exceptions, they move in the same direction. So it's an exception. We don't follow the law over here. We are violating the rule. Okay. So some cases where this is applicable, both the price and quantity move in the same direction. So those cases are called exceptions. So the first case is Veblen effect. So Veblen effect comes from a person's name. His name was Veblen, and he kind of brought this effect into the limelight, that rich people, specifically uber rich people, would not want to buy when prices are low. Quantity demanded of these goods and services by the rich, the more would be the demand from the rich for these goods and services. Not want to buy the commodity the moment its prices are slashed and everybody is able to afford them. So this is a situation where people are not behaving like a rational consumer. What does a rational consumer want to do? Pay less and get more. We are doing the other way around here. We are paying more to get more. That's something beyond consumer rationality and hence an exception to the law. Clear? Likewise, we have bandwagon effect. Again, this is a name of a person who observed this phenomena and kind of propounded the theory that it is opposed to the law of demand. So what does this state? Bandwagon says that when middle class people imitate the behavior of the rich, all right, they imitate, they copy the rich, and when they copy the rich, they will end up buying high priced commodities. What are they doing? They are creating a higher demand for expensive goods. Again, we are violating the law because we just did this. We are not supposed to do this if you are following the law of demand, but we did this. So this is an exception again. Necessities. Necessities are something that you need to survive, right? But in this case, let us say we talk about cancer medication. So cancer medication basically let the prices go down and then I will buy. We are again creating a demand for this medication. So we are again in line with this segment here, and hence the law of demand is violated, right? Apart from that, we have a very strange relationship in our heads as consumers with regards to price and quality. What is this relationship? We always believe that high priced commodities means good quality, and that is one of the reasons why you would see a lot of people purchasing from malls or from brands. So all the goods quality is high, we don't mind paying a higher price for the goods that we purchase from there. So at higher prices we are demanding more goods, again violating the law. we are leaving our consumer rationale behind and we are focusing on this misconception that high prices means high quality, and hence we demand more of these goods and services. One of the important exceptions is Giffen goods. Now Giffen again is a name of a person, it's the surname or the last name of a person, and he observed this phenomena which mentioned that people don't behave rationally when it comes to Giffen goods. Now how do we identify Giffen goods? So first of all, Giffen goods are inferior goods. So we've already seen how income and inferior goods are related. Now when we talk about Giffen goods, these are the goods that would consume a bigger proportion of consumers' income. Alright. So they would consume, let me write that down, a large proportion of the consumer's income. That two commodities, one is wheat and the other one is, let us say, bajra. Okay, it's a false, all right, and wheat is considered a superior commodity. It's more expensive than bajra. So when the price of bajra falls, ideally, rationally, people should buy more of bajra because it's cheaper. They will buy this superior commodity. This is how Giffen goods work. So Giffen goods would vary directly with price. So a fall in price would compel people to buy lesser of Giffen goods and more of superior goods, and with an increase in price, people would question on Giffen goods at both the times. And then we have fashionable goods. That's another exception to the law. So when we talk about fashionable goods, these are the goods in trend, and by default all fashionable goods are expensive. They are highly priced but still highly demanded. So this is another segment here. The first one is movement along the demand curve, and the second one is movement of in price ceteris paribus, other factors remaining constant, whereas movement of the demand curve would happen when there are changes in other factors that influence the demand. Movement along the demand curve, one scenario is extension or expansion in demand. So extension is a situation where you would see, let me use a different color here. Okay. So extension is a situation where you would see a reduction in the price. So price has gone down from P to P1 and an increment in the quantity from Q to Q1. So what happened? Price went down, quantity went up, ceteris paribus, other factors remaining constant. And if we see on the 2 pointers that are listed on the demand curve, point A and point B, here there is a downward movement from A to B. So if you see a movement like this on a demand curve, it is extension. It's a downward movement on the same curve. Okay, that's how you would identify an extension of the demand curve. We see there is another segment which we call as increase in demand. So when we talk about an increase in demand, you could see the diagram. This diagram is different and this diagram is different. We have one demand curve here and two demand curves in this particular diagram, right? What does this mean? So in this case, the initial demand curve was D and the initial quantity demanded in this market was Q at price P. Now something in the market has changed and the demand curve has moved ahead. It has shifted to the right. The new demand curve now is D1 and the quantity is Q1. Alright. Now what does this mean? This means that at the same price P, now more is being demanded. So what do we write here? We write more is demanded. If the price goes up, let us say the price goes up at P1. Initially this would had been the quantity demanded, but now since the demand curve has shifted to the right, this is the quantity that would be demanded at higher price. So more would be demanded at each and every price, alright, whether you are at P, whether you are at P1 or whether you go below P, you would still end up buying more than the initial situation. So you would buy more, or more is demanded at the same price, or you could write at any price point, that is also equally fine, at the same price or all prices, they both are equally fine. Clear? Now the second scenario in this is a contraction, which is movement along the same curve. A contraction is a situation where the price increases from P to P1 and the quantity demanded has gone down from Q to Q1. We can see here very clearly, right? So price has gone up, quantity demanded has gone down. So let me write it down over here. Price increased, quantity demanded fell, and there is a backward movement on this particular curve, which is D. There's a backward, you could also write an upward movement, but backward is more preferable. Backward movement on the same demand curve, right? Now this happens diagram over here, you see that the demand curve has shifted to the left over here. So there's a shift in the demand curve to the left, quantity has also gone down, but the price is still the same. So the same segment would again be applicable at any price point. Now less would be demanded by the people at same price or all prices, right? So this is what we mean by shift of the demand curve, and if it is shifting to the left, which is this, you would call it as a decrease in demand. Clear? Now how do we refer to it? We refer movement on the same curve as quantity demanded and movement off the curve as demand. So this is all about demand. Likewise, we have supply. So supply is something that where you would be studying from the perspectives of a producer, and all producers aim to maximize profits, right? All producers would aim to maximize profits. So when we talk about supply, the definition more or less remains the same, just the red lines that we have in this definition would be different from that of a demand. Quantity of a commodity is still the same. Willing and able to offer for sale at a given price during a given period of time. That's how you would want to write supply. If you were supposed to write for demand, it was to buy instead of sale, and price, time, quantity, everything remains the same. Clear? And again from a customer's point of view rather than the seller. That's how you would write demand. So supply and demand, the definitions are more or less the same, just few key points here and there are to be changed, and then you're good to go with it. So how do you write supply? It's the quantity of a commodity a firm or a seller is willing and able to offer for sale at a given price during a given period of time. As simple as that. Now what are the various factors that influence supply? So these are the factors. So since a seller is willing to increase when price of the commodity goes high, quantity supplied, goods offered for sale would also be high. And likewise, when price falls, quantity supplied or goods offered for sale would also go up. Inputs are, so when prices of raw materials goes up, it would raise the cost of production, and hence the output would go down, and hence the supply would also go down. Cost of production falls, output goes up, and quantity supplied would go up, right? Prices of other related goods, so prices, so let us say price of other goods goes up, they would be more profitable. So profit on other goods would be high, and hence quantity supplied of other goods would be raised as a seller. Technical changes is production becomes better off, that will make your output go up, and hence your quantity supplied to also go up. Simple. Taxes and subsidies. So taxes is something that you pay. So when taxes are raised, it would affect your cost of production, and hence output might go down and your quantity supplied might also go down. Reduced, cost of production would go down, output would go up, and hence your ability to supply, ability to offer for sale would just go up. Clear? Subsidies, on the other hand, is a financial grant. So whenever a subsidy is given to a firm, it would ease out the cost of production. So cost of production would fall. The firm will be able to produce more and hence supply more. That's how you would want to write about subsidies. Goals of a firm. There are two types of goals a firm may have. Either they are sales maximization or profit maximization. Profit maximization we've already studied here. You want to supply more at higher prices and less at lower prices. So if you are a profit maximizing firm, you would not want to supply more at low prices. But if you are a sales maximizing firm, you want more sales to be seen, then you would want to supply more at high prices and less at low prices. There are more firms. So number of firms, if it is large or many firms, then supply is going to be high. But if there are fewer, so if the infrastructure facilities are good, it would not interrupt your production process. So production process would be uninterrupted, your production would be high, and hence the supply would also be high. Now when we talk about supply, supply again could be studied in terms of individual seller, and market supply is from all sellers taken together. Alright, so this diagram here shows one supply curve from one seller, and here we are getting to see three supply curves. So supply curve from one person, supply curve from two people rather, and market supply curve is basically an addition of all of these supply curves at this particular price. This is the market supply. Clear? Now what is the law of supply? So law of supply is remaining constant. As the price of a commodity rises, its quantity supplied also rises, and vice versa. So I have written vice versa. You are not supposed to write vice versa in your exam. You have to write the entire opposite statement, which is as the price of commodity falls, its quantity supplied would also fall. Alright. So technically when we talk about law of supply, this is the kind of relationship we are establishing here. At higher prices, quantity supplied is high, and at lower prices, quantity supplied is low. Now on this particular graph that we see here, supply is an upward sloping curve. Upward sloping curve indicates positive relationship. So let's write down price and quantity supplied are positively or directly related. Alright, you could write either of the two. Now the same as we studied for demand, we have the same segments for supply as well. You could have movement along the supply curve and movement off the curve. The base remains the same, it's just the diagrammatic representation that differs. Okay. Sorry. So when we talk about movement along the supply curve, you will see changes in price. Ceteris paribus, that means other factors remaining constant. Movement off the curve is changes in other factors influencing supply. So all the factors that we just took a look at except the price are changing. Okay. Now when we talk about the synonym that we could use changes in quantity supplied to represent this, and changes in supply to represent shifts of the curve or movement of the curve. The first segment is extension, just like we studied in demand. So extension would happen when price increases, quantity also increases, right? Price increases, quantity also increases, and you could see an upward movement on the supply curve. Upward movement on the same curve. This is what we call as extension, and this is ceteris paribus. Okay, other factors remaining constant. Now when we talk about increase in supply, we can see that there is a new supply curve here called S1. So in this case, the supply curve has shifted to the right, indicating an increase in the quantity from Q to Q1, and there is no change in price, indicating that price does not really have a great importance here. There will be higher quantity supplied at each price point. Alright, so we write more is supplied at the same price or at all prices. And what is happening to the curve? It shifts to the right. That's what you mean by an increase. Then we have contraction. So when we talk about contraction, we can clearly see there is a fall in the price and hence a fall in the quantity supplied as well. So price fell, quantity supplied also fell, ceteris paribus. Okay, and you could see a downward movement on the supply curve. What kind of movement you see? Downward movement on the same curve. On the same curve. This is what you mean by a contraction in supply. Now when we talk about decrease, you see there is a new supply curve here, S1, and this curve has moved towards the y-axis. Alright, so there is a leftward shift. Where is the curve shifting? Left. Alright, leftward shift of the curve, and you would also see a reduction in the quantity at the same price. So price did not change, but the quantity went down. So we can say there is less supplied at the same price or at all prices. So for example, this is how you would represent it in your diagrams. Clear? Now let's take a look at what are elasticities. So change in quantity demanded to a percentage change in the price of a commodity. Likewise, for the supply segment, we will again write the same thing. Ratio of percentage change in quantity supplied to a percentage change in the price. These are the formulas. PED is price elasticity of demand, percentage change in QD over percentage change in price, PES is price elasticity of supply, percentage change in QS over percentage change in price. What are the different types you observe? Under demand, we have price elasticity, income elasticity, and cross elasticity. This lecture is just focusing on the price elasticity segment. If you need a live lecture on income and cross as well, you can put it in the comment box and I shall think about it when I can put the lecture for you, the revision lecture. Or else there are videos available for all the three types on my channel which you could watch. In terms of price, in terms of supply rather, we just have price elasticity of supply. The various degrees of price elasticity of supply are as follows. So we'll take a look simultaneously at both demand and supply to understand how the curve would look like. So when we talk about in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. I have written in short form. So this is percentage, this triangle represents change, QD is price and QD is quantity demanded and P is price. Alright. So when so let us say this is the demand curve that you see. Now in this case, let us say this is our original price and quantity situations. This is P and this is Q. I'll use a different color to show the new situation. So here is the new situation. We can clearly see in this diagram that the change in price is much smaller than the change in quantity. Price fell by only this much, but quantity increased by this much. So when you see a demand curve looking, how is this curve sloping? It's a flatter curve. What does this indicate? It indicates that people, consumers are price sensitive. What does price sensitivity mean? It means like this. Okay. So let us say this is your initial price and quantity supplied situations. This is supply and this is price and this is quantity. And let me use a different shade again. So let us say this is how the price changed and this is how the quantity changed. Can you see the difference in the changes both in price and quantity? There's a huge change in quantity and a very small relative change in price. This is what extend this portion of the supply curve. It will cut the x-axis. See, it's cutting the it's elastic supply curve. What is the value of elasticity here? PED is greater than 1 and PES is also greater than 1. Alright. Next, we have relatively inelastic supply. So this situation is when change in price, the percentage change in price is smaller than the percentage change in quantity demanded. How would the demand curve look like? So in this case, let me use a different shade. So in this case, the demand curve would be more or less like this. Okay. So let us say if this is the initial situation for price and quantity, P and Q, this is the demand curve, and let us say this is the new situation. So this is the price P1 and this is the quantity Q1. We can see that there is a huge change in the price from P to P1, a very small relative change in the quantity. This kind of a curve is called steeper curve. Okay, and PED in this case is less than 1. This is how your supply curve would look like this. Okay, let us say this is the initial price and quantity, price Q, and this is the supply curve, and this is the new change in price and quantity. Again, can you see the change in price and quantity? Change in price is larger than the change in quantity. There is a greater change in price and very small relative change in, and the value of PES is less than 1. Alright. Percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in quantity, and for the supply also percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in quantity supplied. In this case, the demand curve is going to be a gentle curve, something like this, and when you draw the price and quantity coordinates, let us say this is demand, this is price, this is quantity, and let us say this is the new segment, a fall in price and a rise in quantity. They are mostly the same. Now this curve is called a rectangular hyperbola. Why a rectangular hyperbola? Because we see there are two rectangles beneath the demand curve, one with purple lines and one with green lines. When you take the area of this rectangle, of both of these rectangles, they will be the same. That's what it means. And on this demand curve, wherever you lie, whether you are here or here or here or here or here, this situation will hold true. That means change in percentage change in price will always be equal to percentage change in quantity demanded. Likewise, when we talk about the supply segment, this is how your supply curve would look like. Okay. Let us say this is the price and quantity PQS. Now, whenever there is a change in price and quantity situations under unit elastic, they will be more or less the same. This is P1, this is Q1. The change in price is exactly equal to the change in quantity. Just measure these segments and then make the curves. So your diagrams would never go wrong. Okay. So begin from the origin And another speciality is this is a 45-degree line indicating the same thing at any point on this particular line, whether you are here, here, here or anywhere on the curve. This situation would hold true. Clear? Then we have perfectly elastic situation, and I forgot to write PED, price elasticity is equal to 1, and price elasticity of supply is also equal to 1. Unitary means 1. Okay. When we talk about perfectly elastic, it's a horizontal line parallel to x-axis. This is the demand curve, this is the price. So whatever be the quantity, see, at the same price the quantity is rising indefinitely. So PED here is equal to infinity. Now all your textbooks would call it as a theoretical case. Alright, so please make a mention that it's a theoretical. Slightest change from this price, the demand would become 0. That's what you mean by perfectly elastic. We need to remember. So be a perfectly elastic supply, horizontal and parallel to x-axis. The only difference here is instead of T you would want to write S, rest everything remains the same. This is Q, Q1, Q2, and it would keep on. So PES is again equal to infinity, and this also is a theoretical case. Alright, and the same segment is applicable here also. Any change from this price, demand would supply would cease to exit. Let me use a different shade. Okay. This is how your demand curve would look like. It's a curve which is vertical parallel to y-axis. Okay, it's parallel to y-axis. This is the quantity. What does this curve indicate? It indicates whatever be the change in price, quantity demanded will never change. For example, salt. So just because prices are going down, will you start using double the quantity of what you use? What is the value? PED is equal to 0, and again this also is considered theoretical as per your text, so please make a mention that it is again the same curve. The only difference is the labeling. You would have to write S. It is again parallel to y-axis and it is theoretical. What does this indicate? Whatever be the change in price, the quantity will remain the same. So whether price falls, whether price rises, the sellers won't be able to increase their offerings for sale. It will still remain at Q. Again, PES is also equal to, this is the formula that you could use, QD over QP times P into Q. So QD is basically change in quantity, this is change in price. Now this formula can be used QD. So change in price is 4 minus 3, 1, and change in quantity is 10 minus 5, 5. Or rather you could, it's demand, so it has to be a negative relation. So 5 minus 10 minus 5. All you need to do is just use the values. So change in quantity is minus 5 over 1, initial price 3, initial quantity 10. You calculate this and you will get your PED value, applicable to both PES and PED.